Well, that's something you don't hear very often. Ignore the opinions of everybody, including the President of the United States. That, of course, is the judge in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. I'm Michael Bryant. Welcome to our extended coverage here at the Law and Crime Network. Kyle Rittenhouse waiting, like everybody else, to see what this jury is going to do. The case against him for the death of Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Huber, and the wounding of Gage Grosskreutz. He's been sitting there. We hear that he is in the area of the courthouse there, as is his team. We have our own Anjanette Levy on the ground there. Here we have, right now to talk about this case and where we are and where it might be going, is Dina Dahl. Dina is here out of Southern California. Dina, good to have you. Let me get your thoughts on this case, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. There have been so many interesting moments in this case having to do with the judge's rulings and opinions and indecision at times, and the prosecution's, I'll put it nicely, challenges in putting on a case. Give me your overall thoughts.
You know, it's kind of a shame. I think that the judge here kind of made himself too much a part of the case. You know, you want almost a judge to be heard not seen or something like that. I don't think all of his rulings were bad. I mean, I actually think he was justified in getting really upset at the prosecutor for introducing evidence that the judge had specifically excluded. But the way he did it, he became the story. You know, all that was talked about afterwards was, you know, his anger and, you know, so I feel like the handling of that hasn't been that great because, you know, there's not that many cases that the public follow, and this is definitely one of them. And the public takes away their sense of how just is our justice system. And I think that he kind of harmed the credibility of judges when he kind of went off the cuff too much.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that he had reason to chastise prosecution because they went into these areas that they really should not have, the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. All of these things that are triggers in the, you know, if you're in court and you hear that, your ears perk up, something's going on, and the judge let him have it. I think that made it look like he was slanted in Kyle Rittenhouse's favor. And I don't think he ever intended that, but then everything he said from that point forward, people looked at through that lens, like, is he really doing this to help the defendant in this case? Tell me if you've ever seen a case where the pretrial perception, based on publicity primarily, including, as the judge suggested, statements by the President of the United States, although when he made the statement that Kyle Rittenhouse was a white supremacist was before he was elected. But nonetheless, a very high-profile person made a statement. This judge is saying, you got to ignore that stuff. Have you seen a case where what was said and the impression drawn before trial versus what happened during trial has been so different?
You know, it's interesting, though, because I feel like there's so many people who have strong opinions on this case, but they don't all match. You know, there's a ton who think he's guilty. There's a ton who think he's innocent that came in. So in terms of, like, maybe your question of how much will people be swayed, or how much will the jurors be swayed by what they saw? You know, again, I kind of go to that point of, I think the big failing in this case was the one-day jury selection. They did not have an opportunity to weed out people who may have come in with very strong opinions, because a lot of people had strong opinions. I think that is going to harm them. Okay, I'll make a prediction, even though I know it's really bad to make predictions, but I think it's going to result in a really long jury deliberation and possibly a hung jury, because I think it is likely you're going to have at least one person there who was not rooted out through jury selections and has such a fixed opinion about the case.
Yeah, and I think, and you probably agree, that now they've added a few lesser includeds. It gives the jury more options to compromise. Maybe that would avoid a hung jury. But yeah, I don't see this wrapping up today. I just don't. And that's a horrible way to tease our programming. But I don't see that wrapping up today. I think they're going to get at least a dinner out of this and move on. As we know, the court is supposed to be checking in with them on their progress in about the next 20 minutes or so and make a decision as to whether or not they will continue deliberating tonight in the hopes of getting a verdict, or whether they will just bag it for the night and come back tomorrow. You know, Dina, this case has made strange bedfellows in terms of who is following it and who's out there. You, I'm sure, remember the Mark McCluskey story. He was the St. Louis homeowner. He and his wife were seen many times standing outside their gated home as protesters / rioters / demonstrators filed by. They had broken down the gates to this gated community, and they were being threatened, they say, by these individuals, and they were brandishing weapons to prevent something worse than being threatened. Well, they've shown up at the courthouse there for the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I'm going to get your take on this, but let's listen to what they had to say outside the courthouse. So, Patricia and Mark McCluskey outside the courthouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is not right next door to St. Louis, but they made the trek up there anyway. Dina, what do you think about this? He's I don't know, should he be sticking his nose into this, making a spectacle of himself, drawing the attention that he obviously got? I know he's running for office. I think it's Senate. What do you think?
Well, I think he expresses what everybody is thinking about this case. Everybody thinks that if he's guilty, things, will change in terms of what somebody can or cannot do with a gun, and vice versa. I think we're at a cross point, right, in our country, with guns being so prevalent and this idea of self-defense being actually quite vague. And how is this going to intersect? And so I think that it is true what he is saying. Are we going to move toward, hey, it's kind of a little bit more freewheeling? You go out, even if there's a curfew or whatever, you go out and try to do something, and legally you're going to be okay about it? Or is it the opposite? We want to rein in what others see as like chaos on the streets, and we're going to maybe impose more rules. I mean, my thinking on this actually is, if he gets off, I think we will see some cities have kind of an anti-Florida rule. Florida has passed a law that's, in dispute right now, saying that, giving actually more rights to somebody like Kyle Rittenhouse. And I think we would see some cities doing the opposite, saying, hey, if you bring a gun into a curfew and as a result you kill somebody, you're going to have some sort of enhancement on that. I think they will have to do that if he gets off here, because it will otherwise show a signal that you can enter into a volatile situation if a gun, and if in the moment you are committing self-defense, it's okay. And I think that's just going to be chaos.
It is such a difficult one rule fits everybody situation. I mean, we can see from Wisconsin as it is, they have an open carry rule there. You're not going to see that in Portland, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington, or New York City. You're just not going to see that. And I don't think you're going to be able to come up with a rule that allows for everybody to be happy. I just wonder sometimes, if you see a guy like Kyle Rittenhouse, why does this guy think he has to go into a town to help protect property in a home where his father lives? His dad lives there in Kenosha. Do you defund the police so the citizens feel they have to be more proactive? I don't know. There's no simple answer, but all of these issues are I'm sure, being batted about by that jury in the jury room now, because they realize that this decision, although based on what's going on in court, and as it relates to Kyle Rittenhouse, that's all they have to decide. There are bigger implications. They'd be foolish not to think that's the case. So Bishop Tavis Grant there is alongside the uncle of Jacob Blake, and that is Justin. So interesting, Dina, what do you think about this take on what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse and the whole scenario? He's talking about, a guy who admitted he killed two white, well, there's no doubt he killed them. That was not a real question, never has been. Self-defense has been the question. So what's your take on their attitude about where we are in this case and why it even came about?
I mean, I think he articulated well the opposite position of that Missouri couple, as if he gets off, the kind of chaos on the street we'll see, because everybody will come armed, and what is that going to look like? I also really liked what he had to say about demonizing the victims, because a lot of what I heard about Mr. Rosenbaum in particular, actually from both the prosecution and the defense, was really sad. We know that he had just gotten out of a mental health facility, and he was dealing with some mental health issues. But instead of there being any kind of sympathy around that, or to be honest, any kind of like real acknowledgement. The prosecutor called him, you know, a babbling idiot, and the defense attorney said that it was lucky that he didn't get the gun because he was going to most likely go around killing people, with the assumption it was because he had some mental health issues. I thought we'd gotten a little bit farther in this country addressing mental health, but I think it was really just horrible how both lawyers talked about this victim.
Yeah, these guys, the Blake family, obviously very concerned about what happens in this case. Let's listen to some more of what the uncle had to say outside the courthouse. We know that the governor has rousted about 500 National Guard troops and put them on standby waiting for this decision. Do you think, we hear from Tavis Grant there, the bishop, you know, his words suggest that, you know, that's not going to happen. You know, we're going to move forward civilly. We're going to learn from this. We're going to do what we need to do. But he doesn't make it sound like, you know, this town's going to burn. And yet that's sort of what they're preparing for with the National Guard in place.
Prepare, well, and also, you know, there's always somebody who's looking for trouble, right? I mean, there could be one or two people who come to cause mayhem. It's interesting, though, because I do think that in some ways the response, you know, I get responses back, right, about my analysis around this. And the anger actually tends to be those in favor of Kyle Rittenhouse being proclaimed innocent, not really the other way around. And so I actually wonder if that might be where it comes from. If he's found guilty, there might be some anger around that, rather than if he's found innocent. Because I don't know, although this is, you know, this is not exactly as much of a racial issue, although this happened during a protest because of Jacob Black, he may be right that they are going to see this as a more long-term struggle than this particular verdict.
Yeah, and hopefully violence is not part of that. I do have to say, I know people who have not followed this case that because of the racial overtones they've heard, don't know that the victims were all white. I mean, so that scares me, that somebody would come to some conclusion with such a superficial understanding of what's actually going on. But I know who's not superficial, who always brings everything to the table, and that's Dina Dahl, and I appreciate so much your being here for our extended coverage into the Rittenhouse case, Dina. Thank you. Hope to see you on the regular show at some point soon. Oh, it was so much fun. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. You bet. See you next time. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Our extended coverage will continue as we extend further. After a quick break, we're watching the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict watch. They are into their 6th hour of deliberation at this very moment. His life really in their hands. We'll be right back.